Hi, I'm Eric Orange with Burlington County Parks, back at the Workers' House to continue our series on Hugh Campbell. You may not know it, but Hugh published a book. It's full of poetry and stories about the people around Mount Holly. One of the stories that really caught my eye was this one. And Hugh says, "I love walking out to the farmers' fields to paint. And every year, I have to walk a little farther." Burlington County's done a wonderful job with farmland preservation. #1 in the state, in fact. So a lot of those farms that Hugh Campbell walked out to are still there. This one, he actually wrote on the back, "Farm between Hartford and Masonville." So today, we're going to go out and meet Art Smith again at the Burlington County Agricultural Center, which just happens to be between Hartford and Masonville.
Hello. Today we're out in the fields looking at the kind of paintings that Hugh Campbell loved to paint. The scenes that he enjoyed around and near Mount Holly. The first painting we're going to look at is a landscape of a tree in the foreground. In the back you can see a building and a windmill. What's really striking about this painting is not only Campbell's use of color, but his use of perspective. You have to remember with Campbell that Campbell was self-taught. He understood and learned how to paint by reading books. He did not go to college and studied art formally. So when you look at a painting like this, you have to realize that what Campbell is figuring out, which is what's in my foreground, what's in my middle ground, and what is in back, as all things that he's learned himself. This is a very heavily painted impasto application of oil paint. This tree is very, very thick. You can see his individual brush strokes where he would work off of his palette and lay down the branches, the trunk of the tree, and then the leaves. And he used a kind of a reddish brown color that he had probably mixed a good bit on his palette and laid this tree in here. He's also given us, and not super realistically, but fairly abstractly, a building and a windmill in back, so we know that those are man-made objects in this natural environment. But what is most striking about this painting is his use of the yellow and oranges of the sun glowing in the background. You know, we can't tell if it's dusk or dawn, but how he's worked that color in through the branches of the tree is really amazing. He's got some foreground dabs of paint and his green and his little bit of yellow in there to give you some texture, and then we're hit with the tree, and then we move to the back. But it's this sun that brings us all forward again. How he's blended that orange and yellow into the purples and greens is really an amazing experience up close and in person. The second painting we're going to look at is also a use of thick oil paint in an impasto style, but a little bit more toned down, a little bit more tempered. This is an unconserved painting by Hugh Campbell done on masonite, and he has done an interesting thing by setting up this road that leads our eye into the back of the landscape. We're confronted on the right by these white trees with greens and light greens and a little bit of yellow in them. He's laid a couple of green trees in there to break up this composition. A really abstract, impressionistic sort of foreground, and one can imagine the richness of this original background. The blues and purples that he's laid in there, even in a painting this old and in need of conservation, still comes through. This third painting is one of my favorites of his. It's got all that great Hugh Campbell technique and style, where you know that he is either out in this field painting these corn stalks, or he's come out, viewed it, and is back in his studio and painting. And what he's managed to capture either way is this farm scene of yellows and oranges, and he used some reds in here to pull out the corn stalks, the hint of this kind of greenish sky with clouds going on. It's pretty interesting graphically. He sets this up with a horizontal landscape and horizontal clouds, and he breaks that up with these vertical corn stalks. Your eye works its way through the vegetation here, and you're just glimpsing images in back. Again, just quickly stroked with his brush. Heavy, thick paint in here, but again, like the first painting, the real payoff is his interpretation of the sky and how he's used those colors to capture a time and place. Looking at this painting, you can imagine, because of the brush strokes, that Hugh Campbell started with his sky, and he probably started up on top and came down from this blue, working its way into the yellow and orange. He then laid down the kind of middle ground, foreground, phthalo greens, vermilion, and with some yellows in there, and then on top of that he put in his corn stalks, because you can see that all of the corn stalks are on top of the middle and foreground. So that's probably how he painted, and that way he caught what he saw first, which was the sky and that amazing sunset, and then was able to come in, and as the sun was going down, he finished off the painting. This interplay here of this glowing sun in back really pushes these three images: the tree, the barn or the house, and then there's a smaller house back here, and the windmill forward. But he's done a couple of interesting things, not unlike Van Gogh, in the sense that he's given us a little bit of a curve here to let us know that this is glowing and coming outward. Again, it's fairly obvious that he painted this sunset before he painted the buildings, because there is no interruption of the colors and the value of the sunset coming through the leaves. Although he did study painters and painting pretty extensively, so he could have gleaned some techniques that Van Gogh used and then incorporated them into his own work. But one can imagine that he's looking at this and in a kind of a quick gestural way, almost automatic, laid down his colors and attempted to capture what he saw. He was also limited financially with how much paint he had. And so he's using the paint that he has to create a pretty significant image, which is pretty remarkable. He didn't have access to a myriad variety of different shades and colors, and to pull this off is pretty unique. This little hint up here, there's little hints of curve up here, really kind of round this. You know, and we tend not to want to have an image right in the middle of a canvas, but there are artists since eternity that break those rules, and while you might not teach a new art student that you don't want the sunset right in the middle of the canvas, this really works. And you can't deny that it works because of the kind of magical effect that this has. In here, the composition is a little bit more traditional in the sense that he's got this interesting road that leads our eye back in here and back behind. He could have made a decision just to have this road go straight across, but that turning it back brings our eye back into these white trees. And this composition is much like the first composition in the sense that you've got your foreground, then you have this activity going on here. Here he hasn't defined an image right in the middle of the painting, but has allowed that color, that orange and pinkish and the yellow, to kind of bring our eye throughout the painting. From what I've understood and studied about Hugh Campbell, his initial interest in art was to paint babbling brooks and beautiful green vegetation. And he found himself in Mount Holly, where the water is not brilliantly blue, it's brown. And I think that, and he said at some point in his writing that he really appreciated the opportunity to study and to learn where he was. And that's what he was trying to do. And I think in all three of these paintings, his attempt is to capture this moment of nature as it is, as he sees it, and share it with you. We have to understand also that there were tourists coming into Mount Holly that were buying his work at some point. And they were coming here because they lived in Philadelphia or they lived in New York or Camden. And here was the natural environment. And it was really his opportunity to give those tourists something to take back with them, which was, this is what they saw. You know, it's his interpretation of it, but it's what he saw. He was also a pretty esoterically spiritual man, and one can see that feeling of nature and oneness coming in all three of these paintings. And it's interesting, the bookmark of the skies in both of these two paintings. Well, Hugh Campbell's use of color in a painting like this and in a painting like this, where he's got green in the sky, may be attributed to a number of things. It may be his lack of blue pigment. Blue is really, really expensive. And so he may not have had a lot of blue that he could work with. He had it here. In the greens up in here, I think the interesting aspect of this is that this sort of mirrors the ground. And we tend not to see that in paintings. We tend to see a blue sky and then the blue reflected in water. He's kind of got the green on top and in bottom, which gives the painting a sense of cohesiveness. And here, he does have some blue, and he's mixed his yellow with that blue to create the greens in here, which again implies that this is a cloud, and it's kind of analogous to the green that he's got going on down here. This is an interesting kind of strip of green that goes through here, and then his darker teal in the front and in the back. I think this painting is somewhat representative of an angle in Hugh Campbell's paint work, which is this painting of singular figures. I mean, there are no other trees. This tree is by itself. These buildings are by themselves. This windmill is alone. And he was a person who really spent a lot of time by himself. You've got a single tree separate over here from these trees. You know, the corn stalks are just kind of not in that same vein. They're just there. But there might be some interesting observation about landscapes or self-portraits. And in some ways, what is Hugh Campbell painting about how he's feeling about himself, how he sees himself in the world? I mean, he did see himself as a loner, I think, as somebody separate from other people. Painting was really the way that he brought himself to other people. It was his language that he used. And if we talk about language in artwork, which is a painter has a style, and then they have a way that they communicate that style to an audience. And the more I look at Hugh Campbell's paintings, the more I see that language of strokes and impressionism and capturing a moment in time, which is not foreign from his belief of a spirituality, of we are here now, his eventual study of yoga. And it's really fascinating the more you look at his work and get into his work. I would love to see this painting cleaned up though. I imagine in this painting that these trees are really dominant. Really, I mean, your eyes pulled into here, but these and then back there would really shine. And even in a muted painting, this still glows. Pretty amazing.
Thanks, Art. Another great job. So join us next time when Art Smith heads out on the Rancocas with Hugh Campbell.